little initial practices. Usually when you sit down, you put your mind on your breath for 21 breaths. Breathe in and out, feeling the joy of breathing, and put your mind on the number to cut thinking, to cut conceptual activity. One makes you feel good and relax, and the other calms you down. And in the Zen tradition, often they go up to 9 and just repeat, and they'll do that for a few years. But in Tibetan Buddhism, we only do that for like 21 breaths at the beginning of the practice. Skip the years. After that, they always have the refuge in 4 immeasurable thoughts. In Tibetan, Lama la kyebso chiyo, Sengye la kyebso chiyo, Chiyo la kyebso chiyo, Gendun la kyebso chiyo. It's usually done 3 times, and you can do it in Tibetan or in English. Turn to my Lama for inspiration, or Lamas, whichever. I turn to the Buddhas for inspiration, Dharma for inspiration, to the Sangha for inspiration. Usually it goes like that. Often when they do that, they'll sort of imagine that the sky becomes filled with thousands of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and Arya beings. And as you chant, they all kind of shine great radiant light, energizing you and inspiring you and so on. Then the 4 immeasurables, to benefit all beings of, oh no, they're not here. So without that, okay, sorry. To benefit all sentient beings, I'll work for a full attainment. So this is the bodhicitta. For that purpose, I now engage in the practice of the meditation and recitation, which is Gamde, of the Lord of Secrets in the form of the 3 wrathful ones. So as we see in Lojong, we train in love compassion to grow in the ways of enlightenment, and we practice Tantra in order to get enlightenment more quickly. So Tantra is just sort of an adornment or an ornament on the crown of Mahayana practice. It's often said like that. Om Sabhava Shodo Sabhadhamma Sabhava Shodo Ham. Everything becomes emptiness. So there we do the meditation of all the world dissolving into light into our body into light, into our heart chakra, the heart chakra into light, into the infinite clear light nature of being, beyond all form and so on. And we sit there for a few minutes. Often it says in Tibetan texts, jisipa, however long you can. And in West, that usually means time constraints. If you're doing this as a morning practice before you go to work, you can't really do it for 2 or 3 hours unless you get up very early. From emptiness arises a lotus and a sun, upon them my mind in the form of a dark blue hong. Light rays shine forth from the hong and perform the 2 purposes. So in Kriya Tantra, going into emptiness, that's the ultimate nature of your own being. That's the ultimate deity, as it's called. Dundambe La. So it's your ultimate nature, and you come out of that, and as the syllable hair being. So that's your enlightenment nature as sound. So hum. Written hum in Sanskrit, and modern Sanskritists would say hum, but Tibetans don't like as a sound, so they go hung. Okay. Right light shine forth on the hung and perform the 2 purposes. 2 purposes is benefiting all beings. In other words, they touch all beings. And also, so they benefit those beings in ordinary ways, and also perform the purpose of self and others, make one's own life more open, free, radiant, and so forth. The rays then absorb back into the hung. So when one is they're like the hung, if a Tibetan syllable is like difficult, if you know Sanskrit, the Sanskrit hung is okay, and if you don't know that, just put like a little blue fire and think, this is my ultimate nature coming out of infinity into the sphere of just pure energy. In highest yoga tantra, these processes are linked to orgasm and the orgasmic experience. After the moment of the full orgasmic experience, one sort of swishes out of the experience of the infinite nature of being and comes back into ordinariness, but in a kind of a formless way, a pure energy way. That's a little bit like the hung coming out of emptiness. So a highest yoga tantra makes those kind of metaphoric connections, but Kriya Yoga Charya Tantras don't. Whom transforms, I become the three wrathfuls in one. Glorious Vajrapani is dark blue in color, one face, two arms, the right hand brandishing a fire and golden Vajra, the other holding a threatening mudra at the heart. So threatening mudra, that's like that. And so, if you're ever feeling like a little bit, you're in the backyard, your tree spirit is a little angry because a dog pissed on your tree. And the tree spirit's looking like he may be upset, you go. And the tree spirit says, okay. Actually, I think in Asia, the mudras, hand mudras and hand gestures are considered to be sort of energy projectors. And that's what we also see that in China. Some of the doctors will use hand mudras to throw chi energy from themselves onto the patient as kind of an energy healing. This mudra in Buddhism is the killing mudra. And so you never point your finger at anyone just in case the gun is loaded. So if you see, like with Shiva Babas and the Nat Babas in India, if they get angry with each other and they go like, be careful, they'll hold the finger like, careful. The left showing a threatening mudra. Brown hair swirls upwards, standing amid a halo of flame. And the halo of flame refers to one's natural primordial enlightenment nature or primordial wisdom nature. That enlightenment is always with us, like the sky is always clear, but the clouds may obscure the clear sky, etc. Vajrapani's Hayagriva in the form of a green horse head. Sometimes it's one horse head and sometimes it's three. So in this illustration we have here, there's three horse heads, neighing 3 times. And those bring everything above and on the face of the earth and below the earth, pervade all those things, all those forces with it, the enlightenment energy. So the green horse represents Vayu, the prana, the universal essential energies. And so going in the 3 ways brings all of the 3 realms into an enlightenment ambiance. Above Hayagriva is Garuda Raja, king of Garudas. White in color with 3 eyes. His beak, claws, vajra, and feathers are made of swords. His horns are, so the sword in Buddhism is a symbol of wisdom in Tantric Buddhism, so Manjushri holds the sword and the Tathagata family. His horns are made of turquoise and are adorned with sparkling jewels. So turquoise again is a medicinal stone and a spiritual stone, sometimes in crystal healing. And in California, they'll have the different 7 precious stones, as they're known in Tibetan, and in India. And they'll lie you naked on a table with only a loincloth covering your privies and perhaps a handkerchief over each of your boobies. And they put one of those 7 precious stones, semi-precious stones, in each of the 7 chakras. So those stones are thought to have their own kind of energy. And as we know in this world, everything is pure energy. It may look like this or that and act like this and that, but in reality, all material is mere energy. He holds the 4 types of nagas in his mouth with his 2 hands and is adorned with the 5 Buddhas. So the 5 Buddhas means, in other words, it's not just an ordinary bird or even a worldly god or worldly spirit, but it's a manifestation of the enlightenment energies. I, Lord of Secrets, am adorned with the 5 types of nagas and bedecked with jewels, and am wearing a tiger skin as a lower robe skirt. Yeah, I wanted to wear my tiger skin today, but it had a couple of bullet holes in it, and I was afraid something may drop out. Actually, I do have a tiger skin. In fact, I have 2 of them. And just by chance, someone left them to me in their will. Their husband had been a hunter and had killed some tigers. And anyway, left them to me. And often in the tantric tradition, they sit on tiger skins because everything dies, including tigers. And so a good tiger skin make the kind of energy of the tiger. Tiger in Buddhism represents kind of the ferocious, energetic quality. It's a little bit like the dragon or something like that. Also with Mongolians and Central Asians, it's very common for great meditators and mystics to actually live in tiger lairs. As you know, I'm sure many of you know the story, Shantideva, after he left Nalanda Monastery, went and lived in the forest near Nalanda in the middle of Bihar. And when they went to look for him, to try to find him, they found him living in a tiger's lair with a couple of tigers just sort of sleeping over in the corner. Because the thing is with tigers, of course, they only eat you if you look good and smell nice, which is why you should always be careful of what soaps you use when you're living near jungles. You don't want to look too good or smell too nice. And if there's someone you don't like a little bit, you just spray them with something that smells like fresh venison. And ask them to take to walk something to the village for you. Go run to the village for you and buy you some chocolate. Promise them a big reward so that they die happily. See, in India, they had all sorts of ways to assassinate someone. Nobody just goes, it's sort of like the James Bond movies. You don't just go and like bam like that. You're always supposed to do it in a very sophisticated way. Like Devadatta, when he tried to murder the Buddha, got an elephant drunk and then sicked it on the Buddha. I mean, that's a fairly sophisticated plot. In another story that I translated was Nyingma Lama, who died up in the western Himalayas. He came to the end of his life, and so everyone in the valley had become his disciples except for one princess. So before leaving for Nepal, he raced up and down the valley in his horse, running over her favorite barley field. And when she came out and shouted at him, he said, "Oh, I could ride my horse on your head if I wished." And then went to Nepal, and then she planned his murder. And rather than just have someone shoot him or strangle him or hit him on the head with a rock, she dug a hole in the road so that he and the horse would fall in it, and then a landslide would come down and hit him. So these simplified ways of doing things lack pizzazz. They just lack some pizzazz.
Sounds like a lot of work.
What?
Sounds like a lot of work.
Anything worth doing is worth doing well. And of course, a happy ending to that story was then the princess felt so guilty about having done it that she went on to take one of the stones that had killed him and put it as a necklace, made a little bead out of it and made it as a necklace and wore it and meditated and achieved enlightenment in that lifetime because of her feeling of having killed an innocent man. all he did was ride his horse up and down her favorite barley field and say, "I could do this on your head if I were in the mood." Right foot bent, left outstretched, I stand amidst a firing, blazing fire of transcendental wisdom. And that transcendent wisdom there again is yeshe, which means primordial awareness. Wisdom here just means a completely blown mind. Means a kind of quality of eternal higher awareness or eternal consciousness. My crown's a white om, at my throat a red ah, and heart a blue hung. Light shines from the hung of my heart, summoning to the space before me the wisdom beings. They come in front of the three wrathfuls, similar to the one visualized. Oops, we should add za hum bam ho.
Where is it?
They melt into us. It's not there.
Where exactly does it go though?
1, 2, 3, 4. Before the Om Vajrapani Sapariwara. That.
Oh, okay.
Those are the outer offerings, and all. If you ever visit Tibetan monasteries or Asian monasteries, they always put a set of water bowls. Water for the feet, which representing all past karma. Water for the mouth, and all past karma of the water for the feet, past karma of the body. Water for the mouth is all karma of speech. Oil, gende, which is a perfumed oil for the heart, represents karma of mind. And then the 5 sensual offerings: Urgam, Gande, Pande, Pushpe, Dupe. No. Pushpe, Dupe, Aloke, Nivede, Sharpte. Yeah, food and something like that. Means the objects of the 5 senses are offered to enlightenment. Means everything one does in one's life, one offers to enlightenment. Then praises and requests. The enlightened body, speech, and mind to the victors of the 10 directions of summon, manifested in the one nature of Garuda, Hayagriva, and the Lord of Secrets. Chief of wrathful ones, who, when recalled, eliminates the forces of interferers, I prostrate to you. From now on until our enlightenment, please remove all adverse factors for our practice of the Supreme Dharma, the adversaries, malicious beings, interferers, diseases from above, below, and between, and all other adversaries. Kindly bestow on us some suitable factors and attainments as we wish. Oh, that Ja Hum Bam Ho went way back up. How it ended up there, I don't know. The wisdom being becomes one with myself, the Samyasapa. So those 2 lines go up. Ja Hum Bam Ho, somehow in the transmission from the because they're transmitted.
It should be under this.
Yeah, that Ja Hum Bam Ho, wisdom and become one, go before the offerings, before it.
Before it, yeah.
After the invocation of the wisdom beings, lights shine forth, right? Goes up there. Somehow that skipped on the transmission to the printer, I don't know. When we transmitted it, someone did complain that my version of Word is 2003. I published 30 books with it. It still works. Why learn a new one when the old one works well?
Could be better.
You know, I'm not like one of those guys who after 40 years of marriage turns around and looks for a younger, better model. I just stay unmarried. Lights and absorb the blessing powers of all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas back into the Hun, the mantra mala, increasing lives, merits, and all qualities of understanding and practicing and teach for myself and all other sentient beings. Oh, Vajrapani Hayagriva Garuda Humpa. So the mantra we do, if people can do 21 times, that's good, or 108 times, that's good. If you do retreat, if you do it, you can do it by time, meaning a week or 2 weeks. By number, which usually means 100,000 of the mantras. Or by sign, until you have a good dream. And if you want to do it by sign and make it short, you can buy some like good dream medicines. Tibetans have a kind of medicine called happy mind medicine, semki men. If you have 4 or 5 of those before you go to sleep at night, your retreat's over by the next morning.
Cost effective.
What?
Cost effective.
May I ask a question? When you say a good dream, do you mean a dream directly related to this practice?
Yeah, every sadhana, every system talks about various kinds of good dreams, but one is flying, that's a very common one. Another is vomiting, which doesn't seem that good, but if you've really had too much to drink the night before, it actually feels good. And if you've eaten some poisoned food, also feels very good. So those are both good dreams. Dreaming of your guru coming up and saying, like me coming to Stephanie and saying, saying something like, Stephanie, of my 5,000 disciples, you have now been promoted from 973 to 972 in life.
I think I already had that dream.
You have now gone from someone whose certain destiny is to be reborn in a confused state of mind as a housefly for 500 lives to merely for 300 lives. That kind of thing means your retreat is now over. Then at the end, the 100-syllable mantra, Om Vajrasattva Samaya, Manopalaya. When you finish again, everything dissolves into light, into your body into the hung at your heart, the hung from base up into emptiness. So you begin and end the meditation with emptiness. If you look at the other little Guru Yoga sadhana, I mentioned we often at the beginning have a second verse, may all mother sentient beings have happiness and its causes. Be free from dukkha and its causes. May they rest in joy beyond dukkha. And may they abide in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion to the near and far. So it's good to do that after the first refuge and before the quickly achieve enlightenment. So anyway, that's how the basic sadhana goes. And every Kriya Charya Tantra, has that same structure. Starting with refuge and bodhicitta, the mantra of emptiness, Om Sabho Shodo Sarvadhamma Sabho Shodo Ham. Everything goes into emptiness. Then out of emptiness coming as a bija, it's called in Sanskrit, sabun, a seed letter, which is the root sound of that particular tantra or that particular practice. In Tara, it's tam. In Avalokiteshvara, hri, and so forth. Vajrapani hung. And that can come out in 6 stages, emptiness, the letter, and so on through all 6, up to the final deity, or you can condense it. Here it's condensed into just 3. If you want all 6, that's the double cost. But anyway, the other 3 are things like the chaksan, which means the symbol of that. So like a vajra. Vajrapani is a vajra. In a lotus family, it would be a lotus. And in Tathagata family, either a wheel or a sword, usually. So for instance, this Buddha is the sword family. So when you look below the Buddha, you see on the lotus the sword. So in terms of the sadhana, how it's practiced, that's the very simple way. Some sadhanas are, 20, 30, 40, 50 pages long, but there's not that the process is that much more detailed, It's just that there's more description. Like it'll say, and you're standing there in the middle of the mandala, and the eastern gate is like this, and the western gate's like that. Southern, the west, and the south is like that, and outside is this and that and this and that. It'll just put more detail. So it's a little bit like songs where you only remember the first word, the first line. But if you know the whole song, someone says that line, you'll remember the whole song, sort of like that. Usually Tibetans like to do the male practice in the morning when they wake up, because the day is a little bit more connected to our male energies. And the female Buddha practices at night. If you have a Tara, a Vajrayogini, any of the female Buddha practices, they like to do them at night, because the night is more connected with our sort of female primordial wisdom side. I don't like that word intuition. There's nothing to do with intuition about primordial wisdom. Intuition is one of those words people use when they haven't got a clue what they're talking about. What is your example? Ed, what is intuition? Oh, thank you. I define apples as apples. What is an apple? Well, it's an apple. What is a duck? Well, if it walks like a duck and smells like a duck, quacks like a duck.
So, may I ask another question?
What?
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay, so then I think when people are always talking about women's intuition, they just mean women's natural primordial wisdom.
Can I get a royalty for that?
No.
Yes, I think, yeah. I mean, there's some words in English which we purposely use in such an abstract way. I think that it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And everyone can be comfortable with it. But we're not sure if we're talking about the same thing, kind of thing. So here, primordial wisdom means kind of a primordial quality of consciousness, which is omnipresent, but only occasionally accessed. That's the meaning of yeshe, or jnana in Sanskrit. So it's omnipresent, but only on a very subtle level of consciousness, but so we can only access it from time to time. And when on time to time, sometimes those can be because of just moods or conditions that come in, circumstances. Sometimes I think it's because of astrological symmetry. Kala Chakra emphasizes that. When the universe kind of we sort of naturally come into harmony with the universe for a few moments or hours. And the rest of the time we're a little bit out of harmony. So at the times we're in harmony, our primordial superconsciousness will be more accessible. And other times it'll sort of be obscured. Sometimes you give the example of like during the day, all the stars up there, but we don't notice them because the sun is so bright. The sun goes down and we notice all the stars. So anyone want to ask anything about the sadhana, or can we go on to the next point? Go on.
Let me bring this to you.
Can you hear me?
No,
But it's for the people, some people watch on webinar and also for the recording.
Hold it close to your mouth.
Well, just a quick question about
For those thousands and thousands out there watching by webinar, and hundreds of thousands who will watch in future millenniums.
So keeper, like the female evening energy, would that be like a intrinsic, like our intrinsic selves, where is the female evening energy more intrinsic?
I don't know what that word intrinsic means.
It just means our intrinsic selves, where we're just naturally wonderful, loving, and kind people. It's part of our inner being. Innate.
I'm not sure what innate means. Unless I can put a word in a traditional Buddhist, into a traditional Buddhist word, I always struggle a little bit to think of what it means in a Buddhist context. For instance, I am innately a good person. I think of myself as innately good, but some people think I'm not so innately good. I'm just occasionally good. I think I'm innately humorful and playful. Some people think sometimes my humor is off color and off base. Anyway, I think the meaning is that during the daytime hours, we relate, where we have mainly a structural analysis kind of presence in our consciousness to navigate all of the activities of the day. So we say our male energies are more to do with upaya in Sanskrit, tub in Tibetan, method or methodology, which means processing, and to do with the conventional level of reality or ordinary levels of reality. And our female quality is much more to do with prajna in Sanskrit, and so you could say higher awareness in English. Meaning our sensitivity towards the deeper meaning of life. Ultimately, the way emptiness and somethingness come together. At the one time we have a spaciousness in our being, and at the other time we have things filling up our spaciousness. Sort of the Heart Sutra passage, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, form not other than emptiness, emptiness not other than form. Form is feelings, feelings, emptiness, emptiness not other than feelings, feelings not other than emptiness. Form is perception, perceptions are emptiness, emptiness not other than perceptions, perceptions not other than emptiness. Activities are emptiness, emptiness is activities. Activities not other than emptiness, emptiness not other than activities. Conscious presence is emptiness, emptiness is conscious presence. Conscious presence not other than emptiness, emptiness not other than conscious presence. So I think nighttime energy, is dealing much more with that fluctuation. During the day, light is very strong and the pronounced, the way we perceive everything is very triggered to conceptual activity. There's not a lot of abstraction. You look at a tree and it's a tree. You look at an owl and it's an owl, a dog and it's a dog. But at night, everything takes on a mysterious kind of look, doesn't it? The way we experience things is in a much more abstract, subtle, almost surreal side of consciousness. Now, in terms of that tantric practice, I would like us to just try one little thing here just for fun. Is anyone into trying a fun thing? Because Stephanie carried this big begging bowl all the way from Nepal, and she calls it a singing bowl. I'll use it. We have to sit up with back straight. And mostly breathing through the mouth. Now we put the Om at the crown chakra, between the amygdala and the hippocampus, the A at the throat chakra, the Hung at the heart chakra. Then coming down, it's like a tube coming all the way down to 4 fingers below the center of the navel, from the center of the brain down, say the thickness of a McDonald's milkshake straw. At the top, in the middle of the brain, a little moon disk. And at the base, in the middle of the navel area, 4 fingers below the navel, just in front of the spine. In there, a little sun disk. And the sun disk represents our female, the descendant of the original female materials from our female ancestors, and in the center of the crown chakra, the male from the male ancestors. So these are the sun and the moon. And we're going to take a breath. And as we breathe out, first we turn the attention to the navel chakra. Sit straight, or Ed, you're making me nervous. And so the sun shines very strong and sort of releases a nectar that loosens and warms the navel chakra. Then you breathe in, turn to the crown chakra and the moon, and it intensifies and releases sort of male moon-like juices that flood the crown chakra. Breathe out, the red travels from navel chakra up to heart chakra. Breathe in, the white travels from crown chakra down to throat chakra. Breathe out, the red travels from heart chakra to throat chakra. Breathe in, white travels from throat chakra down to heart chakra. Breathe out, white travels from red travels from throat chakra up to crown chakra. Breathe in, white travels from heart chakra down to navel chakra. So we're going to try and do that, first breathing a little bit slowly and then picking up the pace of the breathing. So take a deep breath. So the navel chakra floods. Breathe in. The moon expands with radiance and juices, floods the crown chakra. Breathe out. Red rises from navel to heart. Breathe in. White descends from crown to throat. Breathe out. Red rises from heart to throat. Breathe in. White descends from throat to heart. Breathe out. Red rises from throat to crown. Breathe in. White descends from heart to navel. And each time when it arrives at that chakra, it sort of floods into the channel petals. In other words, floods into the energy channels going out into the 4 and then the 8 directions. And completely heals and restores them. On the rising, the female energies on those chakras, and on the descending, the male energies. And if you have a good set of sinuses and a big, beautiful nose, you can do the breathing through your nose, which is considered a little bit best. And if not, you can do it through your mouth. But when you do it through the mouth, it dries your mouth very quickly. Your body doesn't lubricate your mouth in the same way that the blood naturally lubricates the nasal passages. So I'm going to set the time with this, and at the end of each cycle, I'm going to go 3 times. So take a deep breath. So that was one complete cycle. I may turn this up so it's not so noisy. Okay, this will be the in-breath. That's the out-breath. If you get screwed up at the end of each, I'm going to go at the end of each cycle, okay? Take breath in. So it takes a little while to get the mind following the process, like going up and coming down and going up and coming down, the hopping from this starting here, navel chakra, breathe out, red, breathe in, white, breathe out, rises to heart, breathe in, descends to throat, breathe out, comes to the throat, breathe out, breathe in, down to the heart, breathe out, up to the crown, breathe in, down to the navel. Breathe out, navel, breathe in, crown, breathe out, heart, rises to the heart, breathe in, descends to the throat, breathe out, rises to the throat, breathe in, descends to the heart, breathe out, rises to the crown, breathe in, descends to the navel. Anyway, it's good to do that this from the one of the healing the inner mara of obstructing the natural balance of male-female in the core of your body, or your main energy centers, meaning your brain, your thyroid, your heart, your solar plexus. And the solar plexus includes sexual centers, the secret chakra, but they're both thrown together as one. For 5 chakras, and if you have 6, then there's one at the top of the crown, but that's included in the crown. If you have another one on the lower, it's the secret chakra, which is sort of the even sexier sort of chakra. But usually we just do in those 4. And it's good to do for about 20 minutes or something like that. And it's often used, especially in doing Mahamudra practice, or the kind of formless Mahamudra. We say there's 2 kinds. One is when you just sit with the mind in a kind of doing insight meditation or vipassana. The other is when you get the energies into the central channel. So it's a way of kind of centralizing the energies. So let's try it for a few minutes. Who's a good player of this thing? You look like you can play this quite well. Maybe not, huh? Okay, this is it. Breathe in. That's the out breath. In. Out. Out. In. Out. In. Out. In. Out. In. And then when it's in like that, just hold it for a few minutes to kind of steady the mind and steady concentration and steady the energies. Out. In. Out. Out. In. Out. In. Out. In. It's good. You can actually do it with your hands like this when you're trying to get the pacing right. Like your breath is in, so your tummy's on your hand is in the center of your solar plexus. Breathe out. Tap your tummy. Breathe in. Breathe out. 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 And we just do, say, 10 cycles like that, but breathing through the mouth, okay? Was my counting to 10 correct? Yes, you're just miscounting. Anyway, then you notice the mind, the consciousness is quite transformed. The nature consciousness quite transformed. And when that's happened, just sort of relax into a sense of utter infinite being, the mother clear light. Yeah, let's take a tea break. So let's see, well, a couple of people had questions, so let's do those first.
You mentioned earlier about the male meditations in the morning and the female in the evening. Does that correspond at all with like the Tibetan medicine idea of the male and female aspects with lunar and solar? That the lunar is still the most dominant in the morning before the solar has taken over, and vice versa?
I've never heard it explained from that perspective. But I think the way I've heard it said is that the daytime energy is more connected to male and male processing, the male energy way of processing things, which means sort of concept heavy, you could say. And of course, male is associated with moon in the Buddhist tradition. I've never heard it said that that's because of the carries over until the morning, but that would make sense. And the female's connected to the sun, symbolized by the sun. And so sunset being kind of the symbol of that. And I think that's obviously that's opposite to the way the Mediterraneans came to think of sun and moon. But those Mediterraneans were a bit wacky. You agree? See, I'm from Ireland. We think the Mediterraneans are. I think people from Lithuania and Estonia and Poland, they'll agree. From Germany or Scandinavia, you'll agree. If you're from the Mediterranean, you probably won't agree. Actually, I don't really know where that Western system comes from, if it's really Mediterranean. It may be Egyptian or even Persian, I don't know. I've never really seen a reference to an earlier source. But in India and in the Tantric Buddhist tradition, the moon is male and the sun female. And the sunrise is male and the sunset is female. The reason why it's male and female, given for many different reasons, but one is that the sun is very warming and life-enhancing, and female energy is the source of the warmth and happiness of human mammalian life. And also, of course, the moon is like the color of sperm, and the setting sun is like the color of ovum. So from that side, it's obvious that it should go that way. I don't know how those Mediterraneans got it back to front. But you know, another thing is like, it's funny, because in the words for sun and moon in Hopi are also Nyima Dawa, but back to front. They call the moon Nyima and the sun Dawa. So those Southwesterners also a little bit wacky.
I was lucky to study with someone who was from Pakistan, and he felt very well. Their whole system was based on the moon being female energy, and more emotional, having to do with
Yeah, and of
menstrual
course
cycles.
that's Middle East, because Pakistan
Yes.
is Muslim, so
Yeah.
then it comes, that would indicate also that it's more connected to the Mediterranean and perhaps to the Ottoman and the Persian parts of the world, Syria, Baghdad, those kind of things. But anyway, it's not really terribly relevant. So long as the system is internally consistent, these are just symbols and metaphors. So if we're standing here pointing at the moon, we're like that, at that light, and if you point at the light, you're pointing the opposite way. If you point at the sun, that light. Stephanie, you're pointing the wrong way. I'm pointing that way, you see. You're pointing. So these metaphors are only true in a particular, very specific context.
So on my quick research before this, which was just Wikipedia, it said that Atisha brought Lojong, and it was based on his writing Lamp unto the Path of Enlightenment or something like that.
Wrong.
Okay. It also, well, good. It also said the same thing about Lam Rim. So the question is, what's the relationship or difference between Lojong and Lam Rim?
Okay, yeah.
And if you want to throw in another one, throw Dzogchen in there too.
Yeah, so in fact, Atisha, yes, did bring both Lam Rim traditions and Lojong traditions to Tibet. Lam Rim, you could say, he created both of those as they were transmitted. And it's said that the Lam Rim, he writes in his own auto-commentary. So Lam Rim is kind of like a big encyclopedic approach to the Enlightenment tradition as practice, but going into a lot of the side issues of the theories behind different kind of practices. And he wrote that text, Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, Lamgidunma, Janju Lamgidunma, which he then wrote a Rungtrel auto-commentary to that. And later, Gompopa, just one generation later, wrote, I think, the first actual text called Lam Rim, which is Rinpoche Tarakyengi Lamriga Rimka, Jewel Ornament of Liberation on the Stages of the Path to Enlightenment. So he sort of takes that and puts it in a bigger context, because Atisha's his auto-commentary, Atisha wrote both in Sanskrit, so both are translations from Sanskrit. And so both are a little bit awkward reads in Tibetan, you could say. And his Rungtrel isn't that big. And so Gompopa basically unpacked the whole thing but wrote it in really nice Tibetan. And using lots of quotes from references Atisha made, and also references that were in oral traditions at the time. And so Lam Rim begins as a written tradition with Atisha and his auto-commentary. Then one of his immediate disciples wrote Tenrim, which was based on that, which means stages of the doctrine, but it doesn't carry the name Lam Rim, but rather Tenrim. But it's the same, basically an extension of what Atisha put, but written in kind of a technocrat, sort of like auto repair manual kind of Tibetan. So not that pretty to read, and Gompopa was the first one to read one beautiful to read. And then there were a few short ones, and Tsongkhapa wrote the Lam Rim Chemo, which is about 4 times as big as Gompopa's, so really fully unpacks the whole thing.
Who wrote that?
Tsongkhapa. Lojong, on the other hand, was just passed as an oral transmission to Lama Drum, and he passed it to the 3 Kadampa brothers, and it went on from there as an oral tradition for several generations. and then was written out as something like 60 or so statements by a Lama called Chegawa, Geshe Chegawa. And he was a little nervous at the time, I think. Buddhism in India was pretty well being smashed by the last of it was being smashed by the Muslims. And I think they weren't sure if it would make, the Islam incursions would make it into Tibet or not, because actually they got all the way up to the Kathmandu Valley, which is pretty far in. And they had started making incursions across the Silk Road to the north of Tibet. And I think he was a little nervous that things, like the oral tradition may become a little bit foggy. Like if you just don't write down your shopping list before you go to the market, you may forget one or two things. So he wrote out the first text. And then in Gelugpa, the first Dalai Lama wrote the first Gelugpa commentary. Tsongkhapa never did. And that's a couple of centuries later, about a century and a half later. So there's no doubt a few commentaries to it, written by Kadampa masters, but very terse, whereas the first Dalai Lama wrote quite extensively, and I translated that. It was published as Mahayana Training in the Great, or Training the Mind in the Great Way. So both of those were from Atisha, and of course the difference being that Lamrim is kind of an encyclopedic approach to understanding the entirety of the Buddhist tradition in both a philosophical and a practice way, whereas Lojong doesn't go much into the philosophical side and just the way to practice. So it begins with this little Amitabha Guru Yoga, and you sit down and this is how you meditate kind of thing. So as I said yesterday with Lojong, one of the sort of key points of it is that brings everything down to these two quintessential issues: how to understand, how to reduce wrong understanding of nature of self, and how to transform one's narcissism into universalism. So those are always said to be the two key points presented in the Lojong. And usually there's various Lojongs, but the one which everyone teaches today is the 7-point, the preliminaries, the main practice, how to transform challenges into opportunities. The signs of progress, 3, 4. How to condense the practice into 5 quintessential points, and then both guidelines and general advice for success. I think the main thing with the preliminary is usually they teach with 5, but the main thing is based on joyful living, to begin each day with contemplation of the preciousness of the human opportunity. In other words, to start the day with awareness of one's blessings rather than looking too much at the glass half-filled side of things. And there it's contemplations are taught in kind of a systematic way, but one can just really, I think, sit down and count one's blessings and generate a mind of joy, strength, and confidence. And secondly, death and dying, to remember 3 times a day that one's life is short and one could die any time. So the certainty of death, the uncertainty of time, and at the time of death, if anything goes with you, it's not the body, we know that, it's not possessions, and it's not friends and relatives, etc. So if anything goes, it's only qualities of the spirit or qualities of the soul. And so then, those being the more stable of all the treasures of life. And those two are very important, the two most important preliminaries of the five. And usually they're done on the basis of Guru Yoga. Oh, and the third, karma, cause and effect, how what happens to us isn't random or chaotic. We control the flow, as we mentioned the other night, or yesterday, was it, or earlier today? I can't remember, maybe last night. Where the horse goes, the carriage follows. Where the mind is, all other aspects of our life are dragged in the direction that our mind drags them. Like a magnet under a piece of paper drags the iron filings, the nature of our mind. The quality of our mind and the direction of our mind drags everything else, pulls everything else in that direction. So I think that third one is the key to liberation in all Indian traditions, if we can understand, if we can take responsibility for our karmic flow. And obviously Christ was a good Buddhist because he echoed that in you reap what you sow. And until we notice that how our mind, the condition of our mind, how the condition of our mind affects the quality of our experience, we're always in something of a difficult situation. Life always seems uncontrollable to us, out of our control. We seem weak, we feel weak and powerless in an overpowering world. So in the Buddhist tradition, these are contemplated in kind of conceptual structures to bring the attention of the mind to them. So when we say mindfulness in the Buddhist world, it's not just sitting watching your mind or watching the flow of your thoughts, but putting the mind on particular facets of reality, observing particular dharmas, reality factors. And so, for instance, they've noticed that people who do mindfulness meditation without these kind of foundational exercises often have difficulty later. I've read a couple of books brought, because as you know, the Barry Massachusetts and the movement that calls themselves Bujus, the Jewish Buddhists. There are a lot of them were from the psychology and psychiatry branch. And there's a few books written on people who only do mindfulness of breath and mindfulness of thoughts and go into a kind of a listless depression side of things. And the Indo-Himalayan tradition coming from Nagarjuna and Asanga would say very clearly that this is because the beginning of the day with the joy and noticing the joyful qualities of your life, the blessings of your life. Not putting sharp awareness on your mentality. And not putting mindfulness of karmic flow, not feeling the power that enlightenment lies in your own hand, not developing that. So mindfulness, if it goes well, brings great benefits, but if it doesn't, has that kind of downfall. There's been quite a few books written by psychologists on that issue. And Dalai Lama has said that if we get meditation right, everything goes right. Once you develop bad meditation habits, it's hard to correct them. So I sometimes ask people, what do you think it's worse, to kill a few dozen people or to have bad meditation? A lot of people will say, well, it's worse to kill people. But then we have the example of people like Angulimala, who killed 999 people without meditating, and then started meditating and achieved enlightenment. And we have hundreds of disciples of Buddha who never killed anyone, but never got their meditation right and never achieved enlightenment. Marpa had many disciples. Milarepa killed many people, but then got meditation right and achieved enlightenment in one lifetime. Marpa had many students who never killed anyone. So it's not that one should kill someone to get enlightenment, but the point being, once meditation goes wrong, it's hard to get it going in the right direction. Same as any bad habit. Someone becomes a chronic smoker, it's hard for them to give up chronic smoking. Someone develops an angersome nature and is always yelling and shouting at people, it's hard for them to break that habit. Someone has a miserable way of speaking, using the F word and the S word and the kind of crappy use of language. It's hard to break them of those bad habits. That's why Genghis Khan said there should just be one law and one punishment. What? I can't remember. I better not say. That was a Genghis Khan theory. I'm not sure it panned out in the end. If you want a question, you need a microphone. Who's got the microphone?
I was going to ask, like, what are the earmarks, like, of if your meditation is a bad meditation if you're going in the wrong direction? I mean,
if you have an authentic, qualified, great meditation teacher like me, there's no danger. I think in cases where people train closely with qualified teachers, there's no problem. Problem comes, I think people do like a little meditation course here or there, in Thailand or Burma or Nepal or something like that. And then they, wonk off to the middle of Iowa or Florida or New Orleans or something like that, and they don't have any connection with a living tradition, or much connection. So then that's really the problem, I think. And if they have a close relationship with a living tradition, like in the Zen monasteries of Korea or Japan, the master's living there and you're living there, so obviously it's not going to go that far off. Or if you're living in a meditative community, but I think people who do solitary practice. So with Buddha, say, for instance, people would walk with him for a month or two and then, go back to their normal life. That'd be what they could do and may not ever see him again. So that's the kind of thing I think more. But I think also it means when you go into meditation, you can develop a system of kind of just going into a kind of an escapist trance, kind of like a deep freeze. Especially from mindfulness style, those kind of satipatthana, just watching or vipassana styles of meditation, if they're not supplemented with more energetic and active meditations. So I think that's what it's referring to. So based on those foundations, in the Kagyu tradition, they call those the Lorak Nabshi, the 4 ways of turning the mind. In other words, picking up one's energies and pointing them in the right direction. And in the Atisha tradition of Lam Rim, there are Kebosum Ginyamlan, the way of arousing 3 levels of spiritual perspective, so to speak. One being the perspective of commitment to a happy, healthy living, commitment to liberation, and then thirdly, commitment to love and compassion. Then the main practice being here they're called the ultimate bodhicitta, meaning emptiness, and the conventional bodhicitta, actually, which is literally the completely deceived bodhicitta. So many of the Tibetan commentaries begin with the emptiness side, the teaching on emptiness. And 4 lines are given, you could say a little bit like Zen koans or then Zen pointers. The great Khenze Wangpo, the first Khenze Lama. And it was Kamtrul. It was Kamtrul Rinpoche, the first Kamtrul Rinpoche. Lodro Taye. He said the first 3 pointers are a little bit for contemplative meditation, and the 4th for settled meditation. So those 2 kinds of meditation are discussed there. Contemplative, in other words, the mind looking at something in specific, and the 4th is the mind just resting in its own deeper nature, not looking at anything. And the first of those is how observe the dream-like nature of all experience. So one would begin with this little guru yoga. You chant and you come down to the part where you finish it, and then you do the meditation that you're going to do for that day. And in this, coming down to emptiness, you just rest the mind, sitting in 7-point meditation. And you just observe the dreamlike nature of experience. In other words, holding that kind of thought, something as like a pointer. And different commentaries go into different depths of the meaning. But the meaning is essentially our own sense of self is like a moon reflected in water, or like a self dreamed of in a dream. Objects that we experience when we're not dreaming, when we're awake, have a dream-like character in that the way they exist is different than the way in which they appear. So sometimes in the Lam Rim literature, for instance, Atisha, rather than Lojong, Atisha recommends that to notice this, think of anything like an elephant. And if you think an elephant exists the way it appears in reality, the way it appears in your mind, notice how the elephant is not in the elephant's tail, and it's not in the elephant's snout or in the elephant's ear. That essentially we generate this conceptual idea of elephant, and we relate to the conceptual idea as though it were the actual elephant. But when you look at the elephant, you notice it's unfindable in its tail, or it's in its nose, or in its toes, or any part like that. So Atisha suggests that. And then when you notice the dreamlike nature, just to sit and watch your mind, and watch how, just like in dreams, dreams float through your mind. In your waking consciousness, you experience the outer world other than it exists, and you experience your own inner thoughts other than they exist. So let's do that as a 10-minute meditation. The dreamlike nature of things. So one's own self, the moon in water, outer phenomena like an hallucination or a mirage. Sometimes those are used in the commentarial literature. Like an hallucination, because when you're on food poisoning or on drugs, you hallucinate things that aren't normally seen in normal states of mind, but they're just as real as the things you see in states of mind. For instance, I was once shopping in Home Depot, in Atlanta. And this fundamentalist Christian thought I stole her shopping cart. And that was a busy day at Home Depot, so a shopping cart was hard to find. And she came up to me and said, "You took my shopping cart." And she came up with the guy working in the place, trying to look authoritative. I said, "Nope, I did not. This is my shopping cart." And she said, "God is going to punish you for this." And then she found her own shopping cart and she came running back. So at first I looked like a shopping cart thief. And whenever she looked at me, all she saw was a shopping cart thief. Then she found her own shopping cart with her own shopping things in it, 2 or 3 of which were the same as stuff on mine. And 2 or 3 of which were different, which were hers and not mine. So she thought I had taken hers and taken off the ones I didn't want and just put on some extra ones that I wanted. I said, "Oh, I guess your God's going to punish you for false accusation." Because actually false accusations, the Bible is a very serious thing, because in the olden days, false accusation, you could actually, you could be the greatest president in the history of the country and someone falsely accuses you of coordinating with some foreign country, and that false accusation could displace you, even in ancient times. So let's do that meditation. Just notice how one's sense of self is like the moon and water, like dreaming of the moon and water. And even in ordinary experience and waking experiences, all things have a quality of arising in our mind the way images arise in the state of dream. They seem to be separate, just as in a dream they seem to be separate. But how separate really are they? So the dreamlike nature. Oh yes, we better use this. Did you like that, Stephanie? So this is called ultimate bodhicitta, but it's only ultimate bodhicitta later when we actually have deep meditation based on the arousal of the bodhicitta mind. Otherwise, it's just bodhicitta. So those monks who like to debate like to say, well, the ultimate bodhicitta is no bodhicitta, because bodhicitta has to be relative bodhicitta or deceptive bodhicitta, because bodhicitta is said to be in reference to the infinite living beings. And when you go in emptiness meditation, you don't experience anything. A doer, a doing to, or a doing. A doer doing or done to. But anyways, for that reason, this ultimate bodhicitta only as a name until we get a deeper state of spiritual experience. That's the main point of that. When Geshe Rabden first taught that to us, he had us all bring some different colored tinted eyeglasses. You could buy them in the market quite cheaply. And we'd sit outside and you'll look at something first with clear glasses, and then you look at them with like pink glasses, and then you look at them with like blue turned glasses. It would be very nice to do this kind of thing, I think, visiting a mirror, a hall of mirrors, like in the old circus days, when you saw yourself in all kinds of ways based on the way you look in the mirror. In some of the traditions, they used to do things to sort of invoke this sense of self, how the sense of self is purely a reification, by doing unique kind of things like going in a cave and yelling things flattering to yourself, like, Glenn, you're great, and watching how your mind reacts when it hears how sweet those words sound when they come back as an echo. And then yelling an insult at yourself, like, Glenn, you're not as great as Ed.
Which Ed?
And then watching the way you reacted to your sense of self. In other words, sort of challenging your sense of self, and noticing how the sense of self is a kind of a reification or a creation, like a moon in water is a creation of the way light works, and the moon reflects and water carries and reflects, and so on and so forth. But to notice how when we're in a good mood, the world looks very beautiful, and when we're not in a good mood, it looks not so beautiful. When we're angry, it looks very irritating, and when we're hungry, everything looks edible. Even tofu becomes edible when you are sufficiently hungry. Even broccoli, which takes 3 days of fasting before it becomes looking tasty.
You should change over to broccolini.
That may do it. So the dreamlike character, the way, and in dream theory, the way your body lies influences the nature of your dream, and the food you eat before you sleep influence the nature of your dreams. Things that are bothering you influence the nature of your dreams. Your dreams are carried in all kinds of directions based on nothing which is in the actual content on the dream. So in that way, our own perceptions of all things are distorted, if you will, and therefore are empty of existing in the manner of their appearance. So when we do that sitting on a meditation cushion, it's just observing that phenomena in a quiet way within ourselves, when we do it between meditation sessions, it says, be like an illusory, playful child. In other words, walking around noticing how things are dreamlike and illusory-like. Like a little child, that playful quality is sort of mentioned in the... And for the second one, how the mind itself is unfindable. When we think of mind, we think we understand mind, but it's a very elusive substance. Yesterday's mind is gone, and tomorrow's mind not yet here, and the present mind, even in the period of a sneeze, has already passed. So just noticing that in one's meditation, in other words, sitting and watching the nature of mind from the point of view of the three times and the unfindability of mind. So let's do that for 10 minutes, just the unfindability of mind. Gyawa di nyurdu da jamba yongi ngutrub gyurne drawa chikyung malupa te sala gupar sho shancho samsho rinpoche make pana kegerchi kepa nyampa me pa yang kone kondu pelwar sho.